Robert Redford. These are the ones I haven't been able to work with yet.
Yes, this was pretty obviously not going to happen. And I think they banned me from The Tonight Show. I've never been on since.
And you know, God bless him. Yeah. And the looks, though, from one to the other down the line, all of you realizing what was happening is just wonderful.
At 93 years old, Angie Dickinson finally broke her silence about Robert Redford. For decades, fans whispered and speculated about what truly connected the two Hollywood legends. Were they ever more than friends? Or was there a secret story behind their bond that no one dared to reveal? Redford, the golden boy who redefined American cinema, and Dickinson, the fearless beauty who shattered barriers for women on screen, seemed destined to cross paths in ways that went far deeper than the public ever realized. Now, after his passing, Angie has spoken. What she revealed about Redford stunned everyone. Before Angie Dickinson became the glamorous star who would later share the screen with Hollywood's biggest legends, she was just Angeline Brown, born on September 30, 1931, in the small town of Culm, North Dakota. Her parents, Frederica and Leo Henry Brown, were of German descent, raising their family during the hardships of the Great Depression. It was a childhood defined by modesty and struggle, but also by the grit and determination that would stay with her for life. When the family eventually moved to Burbank, California, Angie's world expanded. She was no longer surrounded by endless farmland and quiet plains. She was suddenly in the shadow of Hollywood itself. At school, her intelligence and striking beauty set her apart, though her ambitions at the time focused on becoming a writer, someone behind the scenes shaping stories rather than standing in front of cameras. But fate had other plans. In the early 1950s, a beauty pageant changed everything. Angie's charm and presence caught the eye of casting directors, who saw in her not just a beautiful face, but someone who could command attention on screen. Bit by bit, she began landing small television and film roles, cutting her teeth in the kinds of projects that defined that era. Anthology series, westerns, and small guest appearances. She worked tirelessly, taking whatever opportunities came her way, building experience and confidence one role at a time. Her smoky voice, sharp wit, and ability to balance vulnerability with strength made her stand out in an industry overflowing with hopefuls. Her big break arrived in 1959 when she starred in Howard Hawks' Western classic Rio Bravo, opposite John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Ricky Nelson. As Feathers, the tough yet tender saloon girl, Angie proved she was more than just another pretty face. She could hold her own against the most commanding male stars of the era, and audiences took notice. Overnight, Angie Dickinson was a name people remembered. The success of Rio Bravo opened doors and made her a fixture in Hollywood. Throughout the 1960s, she showcased a versatility that few actresses of the time possessed, moving effortlessly from westerns to crime dramas to romantic thrillers. But her rise was about more than just acting chops. Angie carried herself with an elegance and independence that turned her into a cultural icon. She played characters who were bold, complex, and unapologetically female in an industry that often boxed women into stereotypes. Magazine covers, red carpet appearances, and her reputation as a style icon solidified her place among Hollywood's elite. For many fans, she embodied a new kind of leading lady. Glamorous, yes, but also tough, clever, and unafraid to challenge expectations. And as she climbed the ladder of fame, she began to cross paths with other rising stars, including a young Robert Redford, whose journey would one day intertwine with hers in ways neither of them could have predicted. After Rio Bravo launched her into stardom, Angie Dickinson quickly became one of the most in-demand actresses of the 1960s. What set her apart was her ability to adapt to any genre without losing the qualities that made her magnetic. In Ocean's 11 in 1960, she shared the screen with Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack, stepping into a world of glitz and swagger that perfectly matched her elegance. The film gave her a new wave of fans, introducing her to audiences who adored not just her beauty but her ability to stand toe-to-toe with men who dominated Hollywood both on and off the screen. From there, she shifted into darker material with The Killers in 1964, where her layered performance reminded critics that she could handle grit and intensity just as easily as glamour. Then came Point Blank in 1967, a hard-edged thriller that cemented her reputation as a fearless performer. But it was the 1970s that brought Angie her most iconic role yet. Sergeant Suzanne Pepper Anderson in Policewoman. Airing from 1974 to 1978, the show was groundbreaking because it placed a woman at the center of a police drama, something virtually unheard of at the time. Angie's character was stylish yet strong, feminine yet formidable, and it resonated with viewers in ways that even the producers had not anticipated. For 4 years, she became a household name, not just for her looks or her charm, but for portraying a woman who was breaking into a traditionally male-dominated field. The series earned her critical acclaim, Golden Globe recognition, and a loyal fan base of women who saw in her character a reflection of their own fight for independence and respect. At the height of her career, Angie proved she was more than a Hollywood starlet. She was a pioneer. She challenged typecasting and expanded the roles available to women at a time when the industry still preferred to keep them on the sidelines. Every time she took on a role that was daring, glamorous, or unconventional, she carved out space for actresses who would follow. In Big Bad Mama in 1974, she played a bold outlaw matriarch, unafraid to embrace a rawer, more risque side of herself on screen. Then in the 1980s, she stunned audiences in Brian De Palma's Dressed to Kill in 1980, where she brought heartbreaking vulnerability to the role of a lonely housewife. Each project was a reminder that Angie refused to be predictable. What made her legacy even more striking was the contrast between her glamour and her grit. On red carpets, she was photographed in dazzling gowns, epitomizing Hollywood style. On screen, however, she could be the seductress, the outlaw, the cop, or the tragic heroine. That rare blend of sophistication and toughness became her trademark. For audiences, Angie Dickinson represented possibility. She showed that women could be more than background characters in a man's story. They could lead, they could fight, they could command attention, and it was this same fighting spirit that made her look at someone like Robert Redford, another Hollywood outsider in his own way, and recognize something familiar. She knew the struggles of carving out a space in an industry stacked against you, and soon, that shared defiance of Hollywood's rules would be what connected them in a way that lasted for decades. Behind the dazzling lights of Hollywood, Angie Dickinson's personal life was a mixture of triumph, glamour, and heartbreak. Her first marriage in 1952 was to Gene Dickinson, a handsome college football player admired for his discipline and athleticism. Though the marriage ended in 1960, Angie chose to keep his surname, a decision that would define her professional identity for the rest of her career. Dickinson became the name audiences remembered, and it gave her a distinct presence in an industry where branding could mean everything. Even after their separation, the choice symbolized stability, at a time when her career was just beginning to take flight. But it was her second marriage that truly shaped her personal world. In 1965, Angie married legendary composer Burt Bacharach, whose music had already made him a household name across the globe. Together, they were one of the most glamorous couples of their generation. She, the Hollywood starlet redefining television and film. He, the brilliant songwriter with a catalog of hits that became timeless classics. From the outside, they seemed like the perfect match, embodying the very idea of mid-century fame. Yet beneath the surface, the relationship was far more complicated. Both were creative, ambitious, and in constant demand, and balancing two careers under the spotlight proved challenging. Over time, their marriage became marked by separations, reconciliations, and the unrelenting pressure of public life. The most defining moment of their union came in 1966, with the birth of their daughter, Leah Nikki Bacharach, known simply as Nikki. From the very beginning, Nikki faced challenges. She was diagnosed with autism during an era when the condition was rarely understood, let alone supported. Angie and Burt dedicated themselves to caring for her, often reshaping their schedules and priorities around her needs. For Angie, who had always been fiercely protective of those she loved, Nikki became her world. She spoke openly about how much her daughter taught her, patience, strength, and resilience in ways the Hollywood stage never could. But raising a child with unique struggles came with immense emotional weight. Despite the family's love and dedication, Nikki's challenges were lifelong, and Angie carried the responsibility heavily. Tragedy struck in 2007, when Nikki passed away at the age of 40. For Angie, the loss was devastating, a wound that never fully healed. Friends and colleagues recalled how profoundly it affected her. how even years later her voice would soften when she spoke about Nikki. The grief stayed with her, shaping how she viewed her own legacy and what truly mattered. While Hollywood saw Angie as a glamorous pioneer, those closest to her knew her as a devoted mother who never stopped fighting for her daughter's well-being. As the years went on, Angie's personal life continued to be marked by resilience. She remained close to Burt even after their divorce, maintaining a respect for his artistry and acknowledging the profound impact they had on each other's lives. His death in 2023 was another reminder of the many chapters she had lived through, some filled with triumph, others with heartbreak. Yet through it all, Angie carried herself with a quiet strength, the same strength audiences had admired in her roles on screen. By the time Angie Dickinson had solidified her reputation as one of Hollywood's most versatile stars, Robert Redford was beginning to carve out his own place in the industry. In the early 1960s, their paths crossed at events, auditions, and film circles, where the next generation of stars was being shaped. Angie would later recall the first time she met him, not as the polished Hollywood icon the world would eventually know, but as a young, almost shy actor with a quiet intensity in his eyes. There was something magnetic about him, a spark that suggested greatness, long before fame had caught up. Angie had seen plenty of ambitious young men pass through Hollywood, but Redford was different. He was not boastful, he was not brash. Instead, there was an authenticity that made him stand out in a town built on facades. She often mentioned how refreshing his humility was, especially during a time when actors with half his charm strutted with arrogance. Robert did not need to announce himself. He carried a presence that drew people in without effort. For Angie, who was already navigating the challenges of being a woman in a business that treated actresses as interchangeable, Redford's quiet confidence was something she both admired and remembered. In her words, he did not act like he was above anyone, even though his looks and charisma practically guaranteed that people would place him there. As the years went on, their careers ran on parallel tracks. Angie continued breaking boundaries on screen, while Redford slowly emerged as Hollywood's golden boy, balancing rugged masculinity with thoughtful, layered performances. They saw each other at premieres, award shows, and social gatherings, and their interactions built into a comfortable familiarity. The press, of course, took notice. Two of Hollywood's most admired stars, often seen in the same circles, naturally stirred speculation. Fans whispered about whether there was more between them than friendship, especially given Redford's reputation as one of the era's most desired men and Angie's undeniable allure. But Angie herself played coy whenever asked. She admitted he was irresistible in his own way, but she never let the conversation stray too far. In fact, she would often laugh at the suggestion, brushing it off as another one of Hollywood's many fantasies. Still, those who watched closely noticed the warmth between them. Unlike many Hollywood relationships defined by competition or hidden resentments, theirs seemed marked by respect. They could speak as equals in an industry where egos often overshadowed sincerity. For Angie, these early encounters left a lasting impression. She recognized something in Redford that she rarely saw in male colleagues, not just talent, but integrity. He was not trying to conform to Hollywood standards. He was quietly setting his own. And in a way, Angie saw a reflection of her own journey in him. She too had fought to break away from the stereotypes imposed on women, to prove she was more than just another pretty face. That shared defiance of Hollywood's unwritten rules gave their connection an authenticity that gossip columnists could never quite capture. As Angie Dickinson reflected on her long career, one truth became impossible to ignore. Hollywood in her era was never a level playing field. For men like Robert Redford, the path to credibility seemed paved with opportunity. He could be the rugged cowboy one year, a charming romantic lead the next, and then a political activist or independent filmmaker without anyone questioning his range. Each role he took on only added to his prestige. Audiences expected depth from him. Critics respected his choices, and the industry rewarded him for daring to be different. But for women like Angie, things were rarely so simple. Too often, she and her peers were typecast into narrow roles: the seductress, the damsel, the wife, and even when they carried films on their own, their contributions were overshadowed by the men beside them. Angie once admitted her frustration with this double standard. She had to fight for roles that allowed her to be more than just glamorous window dressing. while Redford's very presence was taken seriously from the start. It was not envy. It was the reality of a system that handed men versatility and confined women to expectations. In interviews, she explained how actresses had to walk a careful line, balancing beauty with depth, glamour with grit, in order to be considered worthy of respect. Audiences and studio executives wanted women to look perfect, but they often resisted giving them the same freedom to be complex, flawed, or daring as their male counterparts. What made Redford stand out to her, however, was that he never fed into this culture of dismissal. Unlike many leading men who treated female co-stars as ornamental, Redford listened. He valued collaboration. Angie described him as the kind of man who respected women, not just as actresses, but as people with voices worth hearing. On set and off, he carried himself with an integrity that was increasingly rare in Hollywood. For Angie, that respect meant more than charm or good looks. It was proof that he understood something most of their peers did not, that talent and insight were not defined by gender. This difference shaped how she remembered him. She admired not only his skill as an actor, but his courage to stand apart from a system that thrived on limiting people. He was not perfect, of course, but to Angie, his ability to treat women as equals placed him in a category all his own. She knew firsthand how brutal Hollywood could be to women who dared to push against stereotypes, and seeing a man in his position refuse to diminish his colleagues made him someone she could never forget. It was a perspective that explained why Angie's words about Redford carried so much weight decades later. She was not just remembering him as a friend or fellow actor. She was pointing out how rare his respect and authenticity truly were in a business where so many men thrived on ego. And as she told her stories, the unspoken comparison was clear. Robert Redford may have had opportunities she never did, but he also recognized the unfairness of it. In her eyes, that awareness made him not just a star, but a man of principle. By the 1970s, Robert Redford was no longer just another handsome leading man. He was becoming something far rarer in Hollywood, a star who refused to be controlled by the very system that made him famous. While other actors leaned into typecasting or let studios dictate their careers, Redford insisted on doing things his own way. He did not want to be defined by Hollywood's shallow image of him as the blonde golden boy. He wanted substance, and he fought for it. This independence resonated deeply with Angie Dickinson, who had spent her own career battling stereotypes placed on women. Where many saw Redford's choices as rebellious, she recognized them as necessary, the mark of a man unwilling to sacrifice his integrity for applause. One of Redford's boldest moves was stepping behind the camera. His directorial debut, Ordinary People in 1980, shocked critics and audiences alike. Instead of chasing a blockbuster, Redford created a quiet, devastating family drama that went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. It was proof that his instincts were not just good, they were visionary. Angie admired how he refused to chase the easy path of fame. He could have coasted on his looks and charisma, but he wanted to tell stories that mattered. To her, that was the mark of someone who was not just an actor but a true artist. But perhaps Redford's greatest legacy was Sundance. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, when the Hollywood studio system seemed impenetrable, Redford saw the need for a platform where independent voices could thrive. He established the Sundance Institute and later the Sundance Film Festival, creating a haven for young filmmakers who would have otherwise been ignored. To Angie, this was one of his most admirable qualities, that he used his success to lift others. She often pointed out how rare it was for stars of his magnitude to give back in such a meaningful way. Most guarded their position, but Redford opened doors. Through Sundance, he nurtured talents like Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, and countless others who reshaped cinema. His activism extended beyond film. Redford became one of Hollywood's most vocal advocates for environmental causes, long before it was fashionable. He campaigned for conservation, spoke out about climate issues, and dedicated time and resources to preserving the natural landscapes he loved. Angie admired that he was never content to live in a bubble of privilege. He wanted to use his platform to create change. Robert was not just about making movies, she once said. He wanted to change the world, even if just a little. For Angie, these qualities elevated him from colleague to role model. He was proof that you could be successful, without losing your soul, that fame did not have to strip you of decency. And perhaps, on a personal level, she saw in Redford the kind of integrity she had long searched for in her own life. Something rare in Hollywood, where betrayal and ego often lurked behind every handshake. For decades, one question seemed to follow Angie Dickinson wherever she went. Was there ever something more between her and Robert Redford? Hollywood insiders whispered about it, gossip magazines hinted at it, and fans were convinced that two of the most attractive and admired stars of their generation could not have spent so much time in the same circles without sparks flying. To the public, their chemistry was undeniable. The elegant, sharp-witted Angie and the impossibly handsome, self-assured Redford seemed like a natural match. Every time they were photographed together or spotted chatting at an industry event, speculation only grew louder. Angie, however, always addressed the rumors with the same blend of candor and mystery that kept fans guessing. She would laugh, flash one of her trademark half-smiles, and insist that their connection never turned romantic. People always asked that, she admitted once, amused by the persistent curiosity. She acknowledged that Redford was the kind of man women adored, and she was no exception to that admiration. But in her own words, "We respected each other. We enjoyed each other's company." But it was never that. She insisted that the strength of their bond came precisely from the fact that they never complicated it with romance. Without baggage, their connection lasted longer than many Hollywood relationships ever could. Still, even her denials only seemed to feed the fascination. Fans pointed to the way she spoke about him, the warmth in her tone, the wistful look in her eyes whenever his name came up. Could admiration really be so deep without a hidden layer of intimacy? What she did admit freely was her recognition of Redford's unique charm. She described him as having a rare combination of boyishness and strength, a magnetism that lingered well into his later years. Even when his face was lined with experience, she once said, he still had that twinkle in his eyes. He could make you feel like you were the only person in the room. When news broke in September 2025 that Robert Redford had passed away peacefully at the age of 89 in his Utah home, the world paused to honor one of the last great giants of Hollywood. For fans, it was the end of an era, but for Angie Dickinson, the loss carried a far more personal weight. At 93 years old, she had lived long enough to see countless colleagues rise and fall. But Redford's passing struck a chord that was different. When asked to reflect on him, her voice carried both sadness and reverence, a tone that revealed just how deeply she valued the man behind the legend. Robert was one of those rare men in Hollywood, she explained softly. He was strikingly handsome, of course, but he had something more important: integrity. He believed in doing things his own way, and he never let the studios or the press change who he really was. For Angie, who had spent decades fighting her own battles against stereotypes and industry limits, those words were not just compliments. They were acknowledgments of a shared struggle. Two actors navigating a system designed to strip individuality, yet refusing to surrender their authenticity. When pressed once more about the possibility of romance, Angie let out a small laugh, the kind of laugh that left listeners wondering what she was not saying. "We never had a romance," she insisted, "and maybe that's why our connection lasted as long as it did. There was never any baggage between us." Yet her eyes, filled with both affection and nostalgia, told a story words could only hint at. What she made clear, however, was how much she admired the life Redford built beyond Hollywood. His activism, his creation of Sundance, his devotion to nurturing new talent. These, she said, were just as important to his legacy as the films he starred in. In closing, Angie Dickinson said something that seemed to silence everyone who heard it. Robert was the real thing. They do not make them like him anymore. With that, at 93 years old, she offered the world one final truth about a man whose life and career had been the subject of fascination for decades. It was less a statement about Hollywood and more a reflection of her own life, of authenticity, resilience, and respect. And in her words, audiences could feel not just the admiration of a colleague, but the fond remembrance of a woman who had shared a rare connection with one of cinema's most enduring icons. What did you think of Angie Dickinson's revelations about Robert Redford? Were you surprised by the depth of their connection? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed learning about these Hollywood legends, Please give this video a like and subscribe for more fascinating stories from the golden age of cinema. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads about your favorite stars and their untold stories.